Good evening. Welcome to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. I'm an employment law and business law attorney in New York, and I host this live weekly talk radio show and this live video broadcast every Tuesday night from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I have guests who discuss some of the most novel and interesting and relevant issues that employers and business owners are facing today during these challenging and trying times. And in that regard, I'm very pleased tonight to welcome to the show our special guest. She is a professional actor, teacher, and connective engagement consultant, Betty Monroe. Betty, welcome to the show. I think you might be muted there. Happens to all the guests, no worries.
Every time.
Not to worry, happens to everyone.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on this evening. We've got a great topic. I'm going to just tell our guests, or audience rather, what the topic is, and I'll give you a proper introduction and we can get into an interesting and engaging discussion, if that sounds good to you.
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. So our topic tonight, folks, is hybrid humanity, staying connected in a virtual workplace. And what we're talking about really is the fact that as humans, we create connection, right, through speech, touch, and acknowledgement of presence. But in the aftermath of the pandemic, the connection may seem weakened in the workplace. Now, a change to a remote workforce, work from home environments, and hybrid settings have created the virtual meeting space, remote and on screen, in order to function in a new era while working, learning, and being. So the question becomes, how can we, as employers, employees, and business owners, build genuine relationships virtually when conducting business online? How do we keep our employees engaged and connected when they are miles and miles apart? And there are many things we can do, from learning to read body language in a more subtle and nuanced way, for example, to getting a bit more personal in our conversation, both pre and post meeting. So on tonight's episode of Employment Law Today, our special guest, Betty Monroe, is a connective engagement coach, a film and TV actor, and we'll discuss some of these methods for maximizing connection in a virtual workplace. It's really a must-see show for anyone out there who may be a remote or hybrid employer. And with that, I'd like to just read a little bit about Betty's background. As I mentioned, Betty Monroe is a professional actor, a teacher, and a connective engagement consultant, originally from Los Angeles, now residing in Atlanta, Georgia, while actively working in the Southeast market as a film and television actress. As a mom of three, a school teacher of more than 20 years, and an acting coach, her many years of experience in the classroom and the entertainment industry provide a solid foundation and a segue into coaching businesses and sales professionals in interpersonal relationships and communication. Working with many different people in academic and artistic settings has been a fertile ground for observing how people connect and learning to recognize individual comfort levels. She is excited to help you hone your skills and create solid, truthful, trustful relationships in both in-person and virtual environments. Wow, Betty, yeah, it's really great to have you in such a great topic to talk about this evening. Great,
no, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much again for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, absolutely. So, Betty, one question I ask all my guests, out of curiosity, is to tell us a little bit more about yourself. Mainly, how did your career initially start out? And then what prompted you to become an actor and a connective engagement consultant?
I know it's an odd combo.
Interesting combo.
It is for sure. I've been blessed to make a living with a combination of different passions that I've had throughout my lifetime, both as a teacher and a performer and an artist. And now I get to kind of combine those things and continue being a helper, as Fred Rogers used to love to say, always look for the helpers, right? but I'm now finding myself in a corporate world. You asked how I got there from being an elementary educator and a mom and an actor. The acting part was easy. I grew up in Los Angeles in the industry. I have my late grandfather, who is pictured behind me. He was a cinematographer and cameraman for Paramount Pictures in Colombia for 56 or 7 years. But actually that acted as a deterrent. And I didn't begin acting professionally until I was in my late 30s. I was a school teacher and a mom. I went to college to become an early childhood professional. And then post-divorce, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I'd been a stay-at-home mom for a significant period of time and decided to go back into teaching part-time as a long-term substitute for 2 elementary schools, which I did for 11 years, as well as working as an actress in the Southeast market. Fast forward to a little bit before the pandemic, I had decided it was time to leave teaching for many reasons, which would be a whole nother show altogether. God bless my public school and private teachers. You guys are heroes for sure. But when the pandemic hit, I had begun working as a podcast producer for a sales enablement based podcast through a sales enablement firm called Mediafly out of Chicago. And we produced about 165 episodes. And as the pandemic came into view, I started seeing my sellers really, really struggling in this environment. And as we like to joke, I'll be inappropriate and I can make the Jeffrey Toobin joke because, we all, we were seeing all kinds of fun things, people in their pajamas, people sitting on their beds, people looking like this on camera, right? So as an actress, I thought, okay, I can absolutely help people with the virtual meeting aesthetics, how to light yourself, how to set your camera up, what to wear, what not to wear, what to do, what not to do. Please don't eat a steak dinner on camera, which has happened to me. And don't wear your boxers and stand up, right? And then it moved more into the need for interpersonal and soft skill connection. And I really had a passion for that. Actors, sellers, and service providers have so much in common. And I thought I can really help people using the same skills I use as an actress and a teacher to help sales professionals and other people such as attorneys who are struggling in, maybe a virtual deposition space to really kind of figure out how to make it all come together conducively.
Yeah. Wow, it's interesting, hearing about, the multiple passions and how they all interlap and how they're all kind of interwoven together. And the part about your grandfather, but yet that being a sort of a deterrent at first and going into acting. Just really, interesting stuff there to share with us. I mean, I think that I heard that common theme. I hear about helping and being a helper, and certainly teaching, you're giving back to students and, showing them how to learn and I guess grow into responsible adults. And then you get to work with those adults as a connective engagement coach. So really good to see that. I think a lot of us have like multiple passions that come together in our respective careers. I know I love writing and debating and strategizing, being creative. So as an employment law attorney, it's just kind of like all par for the course. But to your point, Betty, really, good to hear about all that stuff you mentioned, including the ways in which people might be challenged with Zoom. And that kind of brings me to my first question on the topic, right? Which are like, specifically, what are some of the communication and connection challenges, perhaps that employers and employees face in the virtual or the near virtual workspace?
Well, I think there's many. I mean, some of the more common complaints I hear are, okay, I'm used to face-to-face, belly-to-belly connection and human-to-human interaction. And how on earth am I supposed to build a genuine relationship with someone in a box on a screen, as opposed to being in a room with someone and feeling their energetic, tangible, physical presence, right? Of course, as human beings, we're hardwired to biologically need a tangible physicality, right? But we can still connect this way. And it's about simply changing the way we look at things. There's the meme that's gone around 100 times with the kitten hanging upside down. If we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. And it's really not as complicated as most people seem to think. I think it is a series of little simplicities. For example, the way we read body language. As long as you can see at least this much of me, you can tell what I'm thinking, feeling. If my arms are crossed, I'm closed off. If I'm leaning towards you and listening and you can see my hands, I'm more likely to build trust with you because you know that I'm not playing on my phone and ignoring you, or whatever it is that you can't see that I'm doing underneath here isn't taking
Right.
precedence to the importance of my communication with you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I heard you say that nuanced little things, right? Simplicity of like tweaking this here and there, including the the body language. I know certainly in the beginning I found Zoom, one of the challenges I found. I mean, I've been using Zoom for some time now as an attorney, but when the pandemic hit, it just all the time. Sometimes one's eyes will change like away from the from the camera, and that balancing of looking at somebody on the screen, but also remembering to make eye contact with the camera. And is that one of the issues that you find people are either like focused on the screen so you can't see their eyes, or they're focused on this camera and it looks like they're staring into your eyes? Or?
It's so funny. It is something people are always asking me about. And I like to kiss things, keep it simple, stupid, right? Yeah. I don't look, if this is me looking into the camera and I can't see you, I would rather look directly at you. You're talking to me, I'm talking to you, I'm looking directly at you. And I'm not so concerned about the aesthetic of where I'm looking as to the fact that I am looking at you and connecting to you in the best way that I can in the given circumstance. Make sense?
It does. And I think that when you're looking at the person, you're connecting, and then therefore your facial expressions, right? Your body language, your mirroring is more likely to be authentic and real, perhaps, than if you're looking just at the camera and sort of not present fully. Is that what you see as well?
Yes, and I understand the need, especially as a working actor.
Yeah.
Everybody is self-conscious and everybody is their own worst critic. And some of the complaints I heard at the beginning were, one of our sellers, God bless Mike, I love him, big guy, bald head. And he said, I feel like everybody is only staring at my lack of hair. And I'm going, but you have so much value to impart. And anyone who takes you seriously is going to be listening to you. And nobody cares that you don't have that much hair on your head, and I get that, especially as a woman. But think about, thinking about from an actor's perspective, if we look directly into the camera, we're not going to be believable unless it is a given that we look at the camera in a comedic situation or a commercial situation, right? But if I look directly into the camera and I'm not looking at my acting partner, that's just weird, right? Same here. If I'm looking directly in the camera, but I'm talking to you, that's just weird to me. And it's to each his own. Each person is going to have their own unique comfort level, and depending on what they value as professional or important.
Right. All interesting points there, really, especially because you hear different perspectives about looking right into the camera or looking at the person or doing both. But I guess there is some level of comfort that the person has to feel. And I guess when you're looking at the person, as you mentioned, there's just it's more real, right? More organic than just staring at the camera. I think the acting analogy, really, is well taken. And I'm also I'm seeing how people struggle with everything from sound to lighting to posture. When we're in a room, we can be sitting or standing and sort of moving around, and we're networking on Zoom. We're kind of sitting for a long time often, and it can feel like, a little odd. Believe it or not, Betty, we're actually at our very first commercial break. So I'll just let our audience know that you're listening to or perhaps you're watching our show, Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. Our guest tonight, the very talented Miss Betty Monroe, and our topic is hybrid humanity, staying connected in a virtual workplace. When we come back, we'll talk more about the trends that Betty sees, some tips and strategies for being more connected. So stick around, we'll be right back.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. Once again, I'm your host, Eric Sauber. I'm an employment law and business law attorney here in New York. Our guest tonight, TV actress, film actress, and teacher and connective engagement consultant, Betty Monroe. We're talking about hybrid humanity, staying connected in a virtual workplace. And that last question, Betty, about some of the communication and connection challenges that employers and employees face in the virtual workplace, I'm just wondering if you can maybe speak to how people's perhaps either misreading of signals or just a lack of perhaps just misreading language, body language on Zoom can lead to communication breakdown between coworkers or employers and employees. What you've seen?
You know, I think going back again to the KISS analogy, keeping it simple, stupid, I think people are placing so much importance on these little things that are, and the word is escaping me, not nearly as important as simply being your authentic self. Being you, being you. We are all human beings being human beings. And while this is no longer the new normal, it's just kind of the normal, and it's constantly ebbing and flowing like a wave. You know, think of it as a beach, and every time the wave pulls out, there's something new to see. So it's about figuring out how you can still be authentic and not focus on the minute things that don't really matter, and getting back to the future. That's a phrase I like to use. We do need to get back to the future. This is now the norm. It's not going anywhere. And I think it's about simply being self-aware, knowing where you need to grow as an individual, and not worrying about the little stuff. It's difficult. You know, one of the complaints I hear, especially if you're, say, a sales professional and you're meeting a new prospect for the first time via Zoom. You know, one of the most important things you can do, and I'll backtrack for a moment, you know, Zoom fatigue. It's a real thing, right? And we've learned that less is more. Less is more. We don't need to be having 18 Zoom meetings in a day so that employees are not able to accomplish all of the other tasks that they need to accomplish, and employers are going to be hard on them. Well, why wasn't this completed? Well, because you scheduled 18 back-to-back 1 hour long Zoom meetings for me in a day, and I don't have time to breathe, and I'm now exhausted. Being on camera all day is exhausting for even the most seasoned professional. You know, and so thinking about these poor people who are just not used to this, and this is not your thing. I mean, if you are an IT guy and you're used to being in a cubicle in the back and you've got to be on it right now, you know, that's difficult. And I think this begs the topic that I really harp on a lot lately in a good way, in that not only is bringing the authenticity and self-awareness in important everywhere, corporate, personally, all aspects of life, but bringing even more importantly, a sense of empathy and vulnerability. And I must emphasize that just because we're empathic towards our employees does not have to mean we have to agree with everything. But empathy is a key component to building morale within a workspace and really kind of bringing everyone together, because look, we're still in this. It's not over. And it's brought about a significant and permanent change, and change is hard for everybody. So it's about accepting the changes with grace and being aware and noticing the little things.
It's interesting, Betty. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see a lot of interesting points there. You know, the whole idea of empathy and just, you know, being one's authentic self, and also about less is more, like overscheduling. I think that, you know, I think society tends to be focused on how much can we maximize productivity. And with Zoom, with people not having to travel to and from meetings, there's certainly that tendency to want to overschedule because they think, okay, well, I'm on Zoom, I finished that call, and then I'm off, then I'm back on in 2 minutes. I don't have to travel from midtown to downtown and to up. And so people tend to overschedule, employers, right? And even employees amongst themselves. And I could see how you mentioned Zoom fatigue. I know, speaking from experience, that when things first started, I certainly was guilty of overscheduling clients on Zoom. And then eventually I had to kind of staggered a bit. So if I could make a phone call, let's do that. If we can talk by Zoom, or even just because too many meetings in one day, it's a different energy, I think, evolve, right? In terms of the level of focus, the level of the rhythm of your speech, and just kind of how you look at the screen. And so I think it's definitely a real thing you mentioned, that Zoom fatigue. And also just the idea of being one's authentic self. I've often found that I think that the etiquette in Zoom is changing and evolving. I think that people used to network in person. Let's say we have an employee staff meeting and it was close to lunchtime. People would say, we'll have a working lunch. And they bring the lunch to this conference room, let's say, and maybe they're eating while watching a presentation, but people aren't watching each other eat. But when you're on screen, whether it's in a networking group or, say a conference room, like you're right there. So if you're eating a messy sandwich, it's kind of, it's like eating in someone's face, right?
Right. And here's where we can bring the humor and levity in. So the reality is we're all in this together. I mean, it is what it is. And the pros so far outweigh the cons. While we are definitely going back to in person whenever possible, this isn't going anywhere, as I mentioned, because the productivity did rise in many, many areas. Sales, medical, it's enabled for a lot of good, right? It's saving companies millions on former travel expenses. It's enabling people to find talent, say in Canada, as opposed to 6 blocks down the road in Manhattan. Maybe there's a better fit. It's allowing parents to enjoy the milestones of their young children, which I'm sure you understand and respect. It's allowing for more family time. It's allowing for a little bit more comfort, but it's finding the balance, right? Where does the scale need to be? It's finding the balance, understanding what's going to work best for you as a unique individual, working with your employer, and as a cohesive unit, which is where the vulnerability and empathy comes in, figuring out what works best for everybody involved and making it cohesive, right? So when we're thinking about less is more, right? We've now learned after 2.5 years, this isn't new. Skype's been around forever and ever. This is just new in the sense that everybody and their mother-in-law is doing it, right? And on a very regular basis. So where's the balance? How do we weight the scale so that everybody feels comfortable? And I think we're getting there. But the most important thing is organization leaders and management really need to maintain an awareness of the less is more, right? Meetings should not be more than 15 to 30 minutes, 30 minutes max. You got to schedule a minimum of 20 minutes in between each meeting so that your employees or yourself can get up, walk around, get a cup of coffee, go to the restroom, change your t-shirt. And, that brings us to the level of professionalism and the etiquette. We don't have to wear a suit and tie anymore. It's okay to wear a nice sweater, a jacket with an open collar, even a nice solid color t-shirt if that's what you're comfortable in and you look clean and professional. We no longer have to wear the buttoned up blouse, the high heels, and everything else. But it has, I think it allows for a familiarity and a comfort level that can be beneficial if everyone involved is aware and willing to be open and vulnerable.
Right. Yeah, I think that vulnerability that you mentioned, I think it perhaps in some ways the pandemic brought it out in all of us, because many of us, if we all recall, especially the earlier parts of the pandemic, the first year or so, I think we're pretty much stuck at home. We weren't in offices, and so we're all in these work or business meetings, right, or calls, and you had people's children as Zoom bombers in the background. I remember one of my friend's wife was in a work meeting, and unbeknownst to her, I think at the time 3 or 4-year-old daughter was in the background dancing, and wouldn't happen if she were in person. Right, and people were laughing, and I think later she told me the story. She asked her daughter, why were you in the background, mommy's meeting dancing? And she said, I had the dance, it had to get out of me, like, something like that, like some cute, but the people like can appreciate, they hear people's children in the background, they see, people's like, guitar hanging on the wall. So
The
there's more
cat
of
walking
a
across
sense,
the keyboard. I mean, it's,
right.
and that's what's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and I think that, really adds to like a level of, of comfort that, and some people I think maybe perhaps struggle with that level of vulnerability, because they're used to coming into an office and you kind of put on your corporate face, whatever, your game face. But it certainly is interesting. I've seen many mediations and Zoom conferences where, and there's different too, because you might have a certain dress code with the courts. There might be a little bit different, of course, everyone's field is different, but for the most part, people have dressed down quite a bit. I have seen folks though take it too far. I once saw opposing counsel in a Zoom meeting and with a judge, and his bed was unmade in the background, and there was
Not okay.
Right. So, I think it's like, but that's to your point, right? There's always a balance.
That is the balance, and it's about how much is too much. There's always an extreme to everything.
Sure.
And at this point, we all know better. Like, don't wear your boxer shorts with your suit on top and forget to turn the camera off before you get up to go to the bathroom. Nobody needs to see that. But we've all been in calls where we've seen it. And I love that you likened it to the little girl behind. I mean, my favorite story is the naked 4-year-old running right behind you on camera when you got 4 CEOs in the leadership going, "I'm Superman," with nothing but a towel tied around his neck. And you want everybody to laugh, because this is the thing.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to maintain a level of professionalism. It takes 7 seconds for the average person to form a first impression. So be professional. Don't wear a shirt with holes in it. Don't have chocolate milk stains on you. This kind of thing, right? Common sense, people. Common sense.
Right.
Don't sit on your bed and don't wear your pajamas on screen. But be comfortable and be human. Be a human being being human. That is my favorite saying in regard to this whole world, this whole environment, this whole new era, this virtual era of working together, because we need to work together. And I think that's the important thing to remember.
Yeah, it's a good point, I think. And then as you mentioned, common sense, like that middle ground, right? Because even before Zoom, there are always those people that say who, got a memo about Friday in the summertime is casual Friday. And there's always that one person, who might ruin for the rest by coming in with, a cut off grungy tank top and just, sandals, open toe sandals and stuff. So it's about, sort of reading your audience and knowing what your culture is, what the environment is. But certainly, to your point about just, kind of being present and being open and vulnerable, I think it's really something that we can maybe look to with Zoom as much as we do in person, in terms of like just kind of being who we are. It's interesting, I think that, people in employment situations like look to their coworkers for certain, let's say, cues as to how they're receiving something. And sometimes in person, you can see someone, for example, if their body is shifting in another direction, let's say, or they're looking off to the side, maybe they're distracted. And Zoom, that can be a little hard to tell, right? If someone, let's say, is maybe like edging for the door, you're not sure, are they just distracted by their 4-year-old in the background over there? Are they bored? So maybe it's good to ask those questions. I wonder, what your thoughts are
At
about
this point, I think it's okay to put in the chat, hey, my baby's like, give me a second, I'll be right back. Kiddo drama,
Yeah.
I mean, we're all there. And, I was on a podcast where somebody addressed the generation gap to me. And I think that everybody has to learn from everybody else right now, right? Change is hard. Change is hard, change is hard, change is hard. Nobody likes to be uncomfortable or escape their box, right? So it's about working together to understand where everybody's at and has come to.
Interesting point. It's funny, our commercial break is coming up in about 30 seconds, so I might as well take it now on that interesting sort of high note there. Folks, you're listening to or watching Employment Law Today. My guest tonight, this is Betty Monroe. When we come back, we'll talk more about some trends. Betty mentioned some trends we foresee in the future, but how will we interact as perhaps a fully virtual workforce and sales force, and then some tools and strategies, for upping your game, increasing your connectivity when on Zoom. So stay tuned to Talk Radio NYC. We'll be back in a moment.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney. And here tonight with our guest, Betty Monroe. We're just chatting in the chat box commercial about different, sort of, I guess, fails and also just kind of humorous things on Zoom that became sort of viral, including that attorney who I think had a cat filter that maybe his grandson or granddaughter had put on Zoom and couldn't quite take it off and said, "I'm ready to proceed, Judge," And it's interesting how, we can take these events and just kind of have fun with them. And again, it goes back to that point, we're talking about being vulnerable. I think about being a human, like our topic tonight, hybrid humanity, right? Staying connected in the virtual workforce. So, but interesting, to note some of those, I think, fun things that we've all kind of seen, and experienced, perhaps.
Definitely. One thing I would love to address, Eric, if you don't mind, in regards to that is, human connection is so important, especially now, because it's not just the muted skills lost due to the pandemic, but due to too much this, right? So I think it's become almost a pandemic itself, right? The lack of ability to connect at a human level. And it's become so easy for people to connect via texting, via email, and you can connect in a human way this way. I'm looking at you, I see you see my real life behind me. A filter is fine if you're more comfortable not sharing everything in your home. If you live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Soho and you don't have a choice, what are you gonna do? But to be as much you as you can be in these meetings is so important, because somebody may see something, a book title on my shelf, a picture of my kid, like fall leaves, and it may stimulate a conversation and allow for that actual human connection and that trust to be built, especially in a newer relationship. And we can get away with a lot more. If I'm meeting with a colleague that I've met with 100,000 times and I show up in a sweatshirt, it's going to be okay, right? That's not something I want to do if I've got higher ups, or if I'm trying to sell a proposal to a company or something like that. But it's common sense, again, use your judgment, right? For when things are all right and when things aren't, common sense. I think the self-awareness piece is so important because of the lack of connectivity, or the massive human disconnect that's occurred over the last, I'd say, 8 years. Due to the insurgence of technology. So it's a blessing and a curse. So how do we balance that scale?
Right. Very true. I remember, growing up, there was no cell phones, no texting. You had to call someone on the phone. Their parents would answer, you'd ask, speak to so-and-so, and I think that's a lost art. And, you know, I hate to, like, I do really respect the young generation. I think they're working through a lot and they're really hardworking. So, and I also don't want to feel old by saying, you know, these young kids today, you know, but there's a different communication style. I think it's important for employers in the workplace also, like, not to mistake and let's say, I mean, yes, people should be connecting more in person, video or live if they can, but perhaps not to misinterpret, let's say, like a younger person in the workplace, their text for their being, you know, not considerate or flippant, right? Because that's what they're used to. But I think you also, you know, raised some great points about, you know, again, using common sense and reading people on the screen. And I'm wondering, you know, like, it's an interesting point about what are some tips, maybe some tools and strategies that we can use, like in networking? I notice a lot of groups go towards breakout rooms, right? And you can connect and then go back to the main group. And so I guess it's supposed to mirror the real networking experience where you're with a group and then you go into often 3 people and you say, hey, there's Jim and there's Susan, and then you go over here. So I'm wondering, like, are there any other examples, Betty, of, let's say, you know, tips or tools, like when you're on Zoom, how do you make it more relatable, more connected?
I mean, in terms of making it more relatable, begin each meeting with personal stuff. Like I said, the stuff behind you is a great conversation starter. It just builds a tribal connection if you find something with a commonality. And if that's not possible, don't just talk about the weather. Ask the person something about themselves. One of the things I like to share with sales professionals is when you're setting up that first prospect meeting, it goes through email. And at the end of that email, offer a unique and fun fact about yourself. Hey, just wanted to share. I thought it might be fun to share that I speak 3 languages. I speak German, Spanish, and Hebrew. I'd love to know something fun and different about you. And that silly little simple thing at the end of your email is going to be that little thing to crack the ice. And that way, when you meet that person, that can be what you start the conversation off with. Or you shared with me that you've got a young child, you know, well, gosh, I taught preschool for years and I have 3 grown children. Oh my goodness, how much fun. And we need to bring that water cooler talk out to the beginning and end of these meetings, as opposed to meeting in the hallway to go get a drink and taking a break from your cubicle or your desk, right? So it's about starting on a more personal level so that you can become more personal and build that trust and genuine relationship, as opposed to making it, you know, get down to business, right?
Right. Interesting point too, because you're right. In person, people tend to walk into a room. Let's say if we went back in time 4 years ago before COVID hit, and we used Zoom, but it wasn't as often, as you mentioned, people met in person more. And there was that small talk before the meeting started. There was a little, you know, how you doing, what's going on, people sharing various events. I noticed that in some employers, like some of my clients, when they have a work meeting, if I'm, let's say, on the call, that could be another attorney, but I noticed that, like, they're very sort of, everyone's all quiet until the meeting starts. Everyone just sort of sits quietly at their respective box on the screen until it starts. And then when it ends, people log off quickly. Okay, so long, bye, and everyone just face is evaporating, right? So I wonder if it might be smart for employers, let's say, with their employees, to maybe, you know, start with an icebreaker, start with, you know, questions about it. People, how was your week? You know, any fun facts, any fun things for the weekend? Any gratitudes that you're grateful for? Because I noticed so many people, whether it's in sales or in employment or business, they sort of wait silently, networking too, for the group to sort of like officially start. And I don't know if that's through discomfort or people are afraid to be the first, you know, voice in the, you know, group. But is that something you've seen with some of your clients? You have to work with them to say, hey, make it more personal, you know, like you can talk before the actual, you know, meeting.
I think that it is everything you said. I think it's awkwardness. I think it's uncertainty and what do I do? And is this okay? But getting to a space where someone is okay, and it just takes one person to start it. And then it generally rolls forward, right? Get the ball rolling, get the ball rolling, get the ball rolling. But, you know, another important thing is it's going to vary and depend. You know, this goes back to talking to employment management and leadership and keeping meetings short and keep them asynchronous. And if you're going to have, say you have 30 people on your staff and you want to have a staff meeting, guess what? Everybody may not need to be in that staff meeting. How about sending out a white paper and making it an asynchronous activity? Hey, these are the things I'd like to address. Let's take 3 days. You guys tell me what you need to talk about this particular week. I'm going to pick the 2 things I think are most important, and those people can be on the call. If anybody else wants to pop in and listen on Zoom, feel free. Otherwise, do whatever else you need to get done. It's not, it no longer should be an expectation for all 30 people to be sitting there like this, going like this, because what you're talking about has nothing to do with them, right? That's a huge thing. And it's just finding those little nooks and crannies to maneuver. And it's going to be, again, different in each situation, in each different profession. It's going to be.
Sure. No, I think it's a very good point, though, Betty. An excellent point, because you're right. Often people might think, well, if it's Zoom, I'll just invite everyone to be on it because we have room, unlike a conference room, let's say, where it's a smaller group. But on Zoom, you can, but then again, if people don't need to be there, and then you see the eyes start to wander into their email, right? You can tell when someone maybe is looking off to the side or typing, they forget they're on mute, and they hear the click, click, click of the keyboard. So certainly that's an excellent point, I think, certainly about, like making sure people are actually only when necessary, right? And it comes back, I think to, I used to mention simplifying a few times, right? Keeping it simple and all that. And yeah, I think, we human beings tend to complicate things. And so anything new, people want to overcomplicate, but, we can just kind of go with the flow. And I must say that one thing I find a little sometimes, a little bit throws me off. I used to, sometimes still does, when I schedule a Zoom with somebody one-on-one, let's say, client or colleague, and I've got my camera on and ready to roll, and they got the camera off and they're just talking. And it's always sort of like, do I say to them, hey, do you want to turn your camera on? Do I address it? Because I feel as if one of us is showing up fully, with the camera, and one is not. So that's, interesting. I noticed myself, why is that, what does that bring out in me? I think it brings out like a sense of like, hey, I'm showing up and present here, and this person scheduled this meeting 3 days ago. So, certainly they would be ready enough to like brush their hair, or get dressed. Or so I don't know if you ever found that with how you advise clients about that in terms of, is that part of the Zoom etiquette that we're all sort of learning? Because I've certainly seen that to be a little bit disorienting when you're scheduled to call with somebody to network at 3 o'clock on Thursday, and you call and they're like, you see, either this
black box, or the black box.
The black box, right? The black box.
And I have actually produced video content tips on this very subject, and
really?
I cannot impress the importance. You do not always have to have your camera on. If you don't need to be on camera, like I just said, don't be part of the meeting. i.e., figure out who really needs to be there. But in a one-on-one, especially if it's somebody that you don't know and you've never met before, if I log on and I get this, okay, what that says to me is that whatever it is you're doing behind that screen that I can't see is way more important to you than my valuable time and what we're supposed to share together, right?
Yes.
So it's unacceptable. And I think, and maybe I sound harsh saying that, but I hear so many people complaining, oh, I can't connect. That's why. And I know it can be uncomfortable. And if you're super uncomfortable being on camera, then that's something you need to discuss prior to a meeting, right? With whomever it is that you're speaking to. And look, there are legitimate cases where someone is terrified to be on camera, or they just can't, or their computer breaks, and that's fine. Again, there's a time and a place for everything. I am not saying to everyone, you must have your camera on all the time, every time. No, there's times where it's just not necessary. But in a situation like you just mentioned, yes, it is, because it shows that you are present, that you are there, and that you are respectful, and that you are both respectful of and value the time of the other person.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I definitely noticed that it does kind of like get under my skin a little bit. It makes me a little bit off my game. And I think it's because you wonder, are they cooking an omelet in the background? And if they explain a reason, it's one thing. If they say, look, I'm really sorry, I had trouble sleeping last night, insomnia, I just crashed out in a nap and I woke up right before this call, so I'm a little messy, or I'm not really comfortable on camera. Totally get it. But that's actually an excellent point. And it's funny, we're actually at our next commercial break. When we come back, I'll ask Betty to share with our audience tonight some ways that she distinguishes herself from other connected engagement consultants. We've heard a lot of great tips. I can imagine what's to come. So stick around to Talk Radio NYC. Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. We'll be right back.
Hey, everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be Frank About Health to advocate for all of us.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back, folks, to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. Our guest tonight, Betty Monroe, connective engagement consultant, and also actress or actor, film and television, and former teacher. And we're talking kind of about staying connected and improving our virtual connection, in this, as Betty mentioned, this new future that we're in, this new reality where the days, of strictly in-person meetings have kind of there's some still, but there's a lot more hybrid, right? A lot more remote, a lot more. And I know to Betty's point earlier, you're right, Betty, there are a lot of advantages to having this virtual space. We can have a conversation, you and I can speak on this podcast, and you're in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm in New York City. And, we couldn't do that if you were a guest, let's say, in person, years ago. So now I would note that you're still muted, a friendly reminder, because I know we always mute the commercial rates. But I would love to find out if you can share with us, two things. One, how you distinguish yourself from other connective engagement coaches, and two, if you want to share any anecdotes or success stories you've had with, let's say, a client of yours, helping them to engage better. We'd love to hear it.
Okay, well, as far as comparing myself to others, it's really something I try not to do as a whole.
Oh, however, I don't want to.
No, not at all. I don't think I know another coach that does what I do, which is my point, which is lovely. And I didn't say that from that space, but yeah, I don't think I know of a coach who does exactly what I do, which is kind of special for me. And I think it's unique, at least to this point. But as far as, there's so many wonderful coaches out and about that can help with so many different aspects. But I think this is rather a unique niche, and I think it's a necessary and very, very relevant one for the times that we're currently in, which was what brought me to it. And as far as a little success story, I actually worked with a young attorney, an estate attorney, estate planning attorney. And I actually was able to go in person to this young man's office, which was wonderful. He happened to be close by, and I helped him rearrange his office so that his virtual engagements could be more professional and more connective and engaging for him. And it was really nice to see how happy he was after just taking an hour and a half to reorganize and kind of reframe the way he looked at things. And it's really kind of a cool thing. So that's one of my favorites so far. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny how those little things can go a long way, right? Because people are trying to say talk to a consultant on Zoom, and it's you don't get to shake their hand and take them to the conference room and give them a cup of coffee, but you want to make sure that you can actually connect with them and engage. I think it's an interesting point. That's just great, that you actually had that experience. So, and have you worked with some companies, or in terms of, like you mentioned, sales, any ways to improve people's interactions, like as a salesperson who's not pounding the pavement and eating lunch with somebody across the table?
Right. I actually worked with one of the top sales management universities in the UK called Cranfield School of Management. And we had a very successful webinar where I was given a really generous review. And afterwards, they mentioned that their metrics improved probably more than half in just a month's time after after applying the tangible takeaways that we shared in our hour and a half long conversation, which was really made me feel great because it made me feel like, wow, there is indeed value in what I have to share. And I love to see it come to fruition and to benefit the people that I'm sharing with.
Nice, excellent. Yeah, great to hear those, interesting stories, Betty. Yeah, I imagine that being an actress and having that background must be helpful in terms of comfort in front of the camera. And I'm wondering, what are some tips you might recommend for, let's say, our audience tonight? Somebody listening out there or watching who's maybe less comfortable in front of the camera for whatever reason, like you mentioned that the weight, or the gentleman that had the issue with his hair, any tips you recommend for people to feel more comfortable in front of the camera? Do they turn the camera off on themselves? Do they go to focus on pinning one of their friends or colleagues to the main screen? What do you, any thoughts for us, sir?
Honestly, I think it's going to be different for each unique individual, but simple little things can make you feel better without even realizing it. Putting your computer up on a riser or a stack of books so that you're eye level, buying a $20 ring light and putting it behind you so that you feel good about yourself. That simple little thing, that's an actor's trick, right? Having a light that's meant for camera, it really makes you look better and feel better because it instills confidence. And it's a $20 investment that folds up into a little box the size of a book. I mean, best thing ever, right? It's the little things. Wear your favorite shirt. Wear something that makes you feel good. Do your makeup that day. You can wear a ponytail, but make it a neat ponytail. But do something that makes you feel good. How we dress up and show up directly affects how we do what we do. Right. So taking that few extra minutes to throw on some lipstick or brush your hair or wipe down your glasses or put on your favorite shirt, whatever it is.
Interesting too. Yeah. And even the posture, right? People can talk about, how they show up and how they sit or they stand before a meeting. I've often heard it said that when people are, let's say, going into a meeting and they want to project a certain way, they can practice by sort of getting to a certain posture, a certain stance that shows confidence, right? Or self-affirmation. I suppose also having standing desk could be an interesting way to do things. That way you can be standing and maybe you can, although some might find that uncomfortable. To your point, it's very individualistic, right? It's very individual. Some people might say, when I stand, I tend to fidget, so they like to sit down. So, but I guess what I'm hearing throughout the course of our show is just how important it is for people to find what works for them and then to sort of check with, read the other person or people, how is what you're doing working for others, right? In terms of, connecting with them, meeting them where they're at.
Definitely. And it's, again, depends on the unique individual, where you're at, what you're doing, what it's in regard to.
Right. I know we talked earlier about also just sort of welcoming distractions, whereas, rather than reacting with sort of feeling, shocked or embarrassed by, let's say, like a pet running across the room or a child, to kind of embrace that as part of this new normal. I think is that people are sort of blending their environments more than they used to. And it can be, as an employment lawyer, I see it as a double-edged sword. So people get too casual with their coworkers and they forget there are certain rules and protocols around not flirting in the workplace, let's say, or making certain comments. But that's sort of another issue for another show. And I've done that show several times to different people on that topic. But I think that, for the most part, we're talking about being authentic and empathy, right? So if you have empathy for others, you'll show up in a real and legally, appropriate way, so you don't have to hire me to defend you as an employment law attorney.
Oh, you didn't? No, stop. You didn't at all. And honestly, I love that you bring up the pet running through the room. I mean, look, bringing humor and levity into these situations humanizes everything. Whether you're a 65-year-old seller who's been doing this for 38 years and you've only done it one way, or you're a 25-year-old newbie, and you're a year in. We all have pets, we all have children, we all have spouses, we all have Amazon guys ringing our doorbell. And it's at this point, okay.
Yeah.
Because it's just it wasn't normal 2.5 years ago, but it is now.
Yeah, absolutely, Betty. It's funny, we're down to the wire in terms of our show. Not the wire, we're down to the end of it. We got about 2 or 3 minutes left. I want to turn the floor over to you to share with us how can we find you, your website, or how to reach you, any events you might have. So for a little bit, the floor is yours, and I'll take us out.
Thank you. Well, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, just Betty Monroe. And I have a website, connectiveengagement.com. Easy peasy. And you can also email me at betty@connectiveengagement.com anytime.
Excellent. And for those that are listening on the audio, not the video, Monroe is spelled Monroe. It's Betty Monroe.
Like
Yes,
Marilyn.
tonight. Right. Excellent. Like Marilyn, good to remember. Wow, yeah, really wonderful topic, Betty. So great to have you. I want to thank you once again, sincerely, for sharing your knowledge with us, your wisdom, and all just this kind of creativity. It's really helpful. I think people out there listening tonight, watching tonight, hopefully can take from this and go forward in their careers and with their employees and employers, and they'll learn to connect better. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope that what I've shared helped somebody.
I'm sure it probably did. I'll also let our audience know that you are listening to Talk Radio NYC and watching Monroe today. If you like what you heard and saw tonight, if you like our channel topics, tell your colleagues, tell your friends, tell your spouse, tell your clients to tune in Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to Talk Radio NYC. And also, you can catch us live on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Amazon. So we're all main streaming elements there. And with that, once again, Betty, really great to have you on the show tonight. And stick around, folks. We've got some great programs coming up. You can catch a lot of live shows on the station every night. And so once again, I wish you, Betty, a wonderful evening. Be well and all the best to you and all that you're doing. And let's stay in touch by all means.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good
You're
one.
welcome. Okay. Have a wonderful night, and everyone take care and be well.
Bye.